Today, I would be sitting on 5.5 crores additional money. Number one, fear of missing out. I was sitting in a mutual fund office when I bought this, where I would see the markets, but I was not aware. This is one question I do get. Shouldn't I buy a house so that I will not miss out? I need not have purchased. But why did I purchase? What is the mistake I made? 1, 2, 3. Yes, 3 properties I have purchased in my lifetime. And 2 were seriously a mistake. And there is one lesson that I've learned. Yes, this is what I'm going to talk to you today. So I'm going to take you through those 3 properties that I've purchased, at what age, and how I purchased them, and how much loan I took, how much was my own money, and all the different places that I purchased. And in this video, I'm going to talk to you about why there were 2 mistakes and why was 3rd property not a mistake. Probably you can learn from this, because buying a property is a craze. Everyone wants to buy a property, at least one. And yes, there are good, there are bad things about buying a property. And in this video, we will cover all those things. So I'm going to cover to you those 3 properties, 2 mistakes, and that one big lesson that I have learned. And now, as a financial coach, I want to tell young families, as I've always talked about, that I am a certified financial planner. So I'm a financial coach, and I'm also a certified marriage coach. I'm an author of a book called Firewall Your Marriage. And my goal and mission is to help young families, to help them to build wealth and to build their cherished relationship. I believe both are important, and often many make the mistake of giving undue importance to one of them. And that is where they get into trouble over the years. And I tell this from my own experience and also from the experience of number of families that I've interviewed. So let's get into this session. And as I always, I tell that I request that you sit as a couple. So if you, as a man watching this, as a husband watching this, and you think that anyway my wife doesn't know, it's a mistake, it's something that is wrong. So I request you to invite your wife. Please sit with your wife, understand this, because as you go in the journey of your marriage, you will need your wife's wisdom. And I can tell this from my own experience. Whatever be the background, science background, arts background, journalism background, or cooking background, or whatever. And you may be thinking, my wife is a homemaker, so what? So I request you, please bring your wife together. And if as a wife you are the one who takes the lead, I request you to invite your husband, sit together, make notes, take a notebook, take a pen, and write down notes, and understand what I'm going to try to tell you in this video. Okay, so let's get into this video. 3 properties, 2 mistakes, and 1 lesson. So property number 1, this is at Nalasopara in the outskirts of Mumbai. So those who are living in Mumbai know where is this place. It's 51 kilometers from the Mumbai airport and 57 kilometers from Churchgate railway station. If you're familiar with Mumbai, the Western Railway and the Central Railway, the Western Railway begins from Churchgate and ends at Virar. And Nalasopara is last but one stop. That is a stop, a station before Virar. So just a graphical understanding of where Nalasopara is. So if this is Kolaba, if you can see here, this is Kolaba, which is the south of Mumbai. And then we've got here Andheri. This is where I lived most of my life. I studied here, I was born here, I lived here even after marriage. And here is Nalasopara, which is quite a distance. Now, these are the suburbs of Mumbai, But this is sort of an outskirts of Mumbai. Of course, things have changed now. I left Mumbai 22 years ago. Things have really changed. Probably they're also now the suburbs of Mumbai. So some quick details of this property that I purchased in Nalasopara. The property number one, uh, purchase date was around 1st Jan 1996. Now, one disclaimer before I continue my session, this video. My first property, I had purchased it in 1996. That is almost 30 years ago. So I don't remember the exact details, but I do remember the ballpoint numbers, the rough numbers. So whatever I'm sharing is are the rough numbers. They're not accurate and exact, but I do remember the EMI that I was paying in those days. I had just started working a couple of years and I had taken this house. So I remember, what pinches you most, you remember the best. And that is why I remember 2,500 was my EMI. The purchase price was around 3 lakhs. Down payment was 75,000, and my uncle and my father actually helped me with this. Home loan, 2,25,000, and the EMI was 2,500. And then I sold this property in 2001, and I got just 3,25,000. I know you may be wondering, is that true in Mumbai? In 5 years, the property prices didn't move. Yes. One of the reasons could be because it was in the outskirts. The population there wasn't so huge. That's what is my estimate or perception. And although the house that I took was close to the railway station, but there was some walking to do. And usually people take a share auto to reach there. And I've been there a number of times when I bought the house, and even later, I knew a friend there, very close friend of mine who lived there. So I've been there. So it is not, it was not that populated. There are other reasons also why probably I got less price. We'll see that shortly. Before I talk to you why it was a mistake, let me share a few facts surrounding or in the context when I made this purchase. 1996, as you know, I'm not sure if you're aware that in 1996, home loans were not as common as it is today. And I took a home loan from HDFC, not HDFC Bank, HDFC's Housing Development Finance Corporation. In fact, HDFC was the preferred lender, and I did not bother to check with any other. There were banks, probably SBI and others. And the interesting thing those days was that I had to take two guarantors. I had to make two of my friends sign up as guarantors, which means if I'm not able to repay, they will repay. So you really had to, there were challenges taking a loan. It was not easy. And another interesting thing that I saw is that those days, buying a property, the affordability was not so easy, which means it is not so affordable. If you look at this number here, in 1995 or 1996 when I purchased, annual income of a person was 1.36 lakh, and the property those days was around 21 lakh. Of course, the did indeed go and buy a house. So if you look at the facts in 1996, apart from the affordability factor, even the prime lending rates were high, and prime lending rates are connected to the home loan interest rate. So it was quite high those days. I don't exactly remember the rate. I only remember the EMI that I paid. So all in all, I need not have purchased. But why did I purchase? What is the mistake I made? So my mistake number one. Why was this mistake? Number one, FOMO, fear of missing out. I purchased the flat, the house, out of fear that the prices will rise and I won't be able to afford. And I knew that some of my other friends had purchased. So there's a fear of missing out. And I believe this is a fear many young folks have in this generation too. Not just in the 90s, but this generation, there is a lot more. Many of my clients, my coaches, many of my clients whom I'm coaching one on one, and also whenever I teach, I do sessions on finance. This is one question I do get. Shouldn't I buy a house so that I will not miss out? Shouldn't I buy a house so that I can arrest the prices so that once I buy it, then I don't miss out in the future? Now it is proven that there are other investment options that give better return than real estate. So actually, this is not a fear. And I had this fear. Now, I had this fear because I had no knowledge. I was not aware of what could be better returns. I was sitting in a mutual fund office when I bought this, where I would see the markets, but I was not aware that these markets will one day give returns that are 15, 20 times more than the real estate. So, fear of missing out. Are you one of those who feel that you will miss out? You are wrong. I was mistaken. So, you don't miss out if you don't buy a property. Now, I would like to show you some facts about 1996 when I purchased this house. The number one is the prime lending rates were high, which means these prime lending rates are connected to the home loan interest rates. And those days, the rates were high. I don't exactly remember what was the percentage, 11, 12, 13, or whatever, close to 14%. I only remember I used to pay an EMI of 2,500 plus. So the interest rates were very high. And the other important thing about here is the affordability factor. If you look at the affordability factor in 1995 or 96, it was around 22 and 15. What does affordability factor mean? If you look at here, in 1995 and 96, the the annual income of an average person was around 1.2, 1.3 lakhs. And a property was around 21 to 26 lakhs. If I take this as a numerator, 26 divided by 1.2 will give me 22. Or 21 divided by 1.36 will give me 15.6. This is just a factor. Now, it doesn't mean anything. You cannot interpret it unless you compare. Now, look at 2011. The affordability factor was 4.8 because 40 divided by 8.3 is 4.8, which means it's easier for a person living in 2011 to buy a house as opposed to 1995 and 96. So I purchased a house when it was not affordable. And my salary was not so much. Obviously, the flat that I purchased was 3 lakhs. It was in the outskirts. Nevertheless, if I compare this, my salary was probably roughly around 50 to 60,000 per annum. And my house is 3.25 lakhs, which means 3.25 lakh divided by 60,000. To something around 5 affordability, which is reasonable because the house that I was buying was in the outskirts. And here, probably these houses are expensive because maybe these are in the South Mumbai, which was obviously not affordable. So I purchased a house in the most difficult circumstances. And as I mentioned, to take a home loan, I had to find guarantors. And it was not an easy thing. Of course, those days my friend said, "Wow, you purchased a house. What a good decision you made." But it was a big mistake. This was my mistake number one. So, why was this a mistake? FOMO, fear of missing out. My cousins, some of my friends who were older to me, all had purchased flats. In fact, they had purchased flats closer to Andheri. And I tried my best. I could not. So I went a little further in Nalasopara. Now, fear of missing out. And also, I was worried that if I don't buy the house now, prices will rise later and I will never be able to buy a house. I was mistaken. And this is the same mistake where many young folks do now. Many of my clients who are young in their 30s, or even the audience whom I have trained on finance, most of them ask this question on apartments, on real estate. They think, won't we miss out? Will we be able to afford the house later? Because if today the house is a crore, tomorrow it will be 2 crores. But the fact of the matter is that it is proven, there is enough data to tell that there are investment options which are better than real estate. In fact, mutual funds, stocks, or even gold. So you're really not missing out. In fact, you can accumulate so much wealth and then buy a house later with your own money, or probably taking a very small loan. Because when you take a loan in your 20s and 30s, you're taking a huge loan, paying a huge interest. Now, staying on rent never came to my mind. I was mistaken. I grew up in a home, in fact, in two homes. First, we were living in a chawl, then we moved on, progressed to live in an apartment. We always lived in our own home. They were small homes. In Mumbai, the homes were small. But from whatever I remember, a lot of them, even my friends, all my friends, most of them they were living in their own homes. There's not so much of the concept of rent. And even about rent, I'm sure people were living on rent. I thought living on rent is like a second class citizen. It's not your own home. You're living on somebody's house. So I was mistaken. And another mistake I made was I was not even getting ready to marry. I was in 25 or so. I was thinking I'll get married at 27, 28. Eventually, I got married in 29 when I was 29 years old. So I was not even planning to get married. So I never stayed, and would have never stayed. Then why this hurry? It was a stupid mistake. I did not even give it on rent because the place was not so developed and it was very far from my home. I could not travel often. And remember, those days, there was no email, no WhatsApp, no internet. Internet had just begun, probably just started, or because I remember using internet in 97 and sending an email in 97. So in 96, it was not there. So I had to travel that place, look for people on rent. And I never got calls because those days we were having landlines. So again, I was mistaken. And that the CAGR, which is the compounded annualized growth rate of the house, was 1.61%. Very, very low. I bought it at for 3 lakh and I sold it for 3.25 lakh. So it was actually no returns. It was 1.61%. I know it is very less. I just because it is Mumbai doesn't mean prices keep going high. And obviously it was in the outskirts. So maybe that is the reason. Then I took the rate of return, the internal rate of return for the monthly EMIs compared to what I got in hand, right? I, uh, every month I gave, I spent 2,500, which I gave to the bank. And in the end, I got that 3.25 lakh and I reduced the loan that was still outstanding. And what remained was actually negative returns. I did not get returns. It was not even break even, not even a break even. So I did not get returns. But at the same time, if I had done an SIP of 2,500 monthly for 5 years in the BSC index, not even mutual funds would have given me more because they gave very good returns those days. I would have still earned 3.2%. Now remember, in BSc in 5 years, 3.2 is less. And the reason is because just before there was this Ketan Parekh scam in 2000. And I sold my house in 2001, January. So in 2000, the market had crashed. From 3,196, the market had gone up to 6,000. And then it crashed to around 3,500. You can see the BSE Sensex historical prices. So even if I had done an SIP, I would have still earned. So all in all, this was a big mistake I made by buying my first house. And what drove me to buy this house was my point number one, the FOMO. Property number two, at Andheri East. It's a suburb in Mumbai, 6 kilometers from Mumbai airport, not as far as Nalasopara. And if you see in the map here again, this is Andheri, and here is Nalasopara, and the airport is somewhere here. So this was my house in Andheri, which I purchased. What are the details of this property? It was a flat in Andheri, as I mentioned. I purchased it in 2001 because in February I got married in 2001. So I started the purchase process in 2001. 10 lakhs, I remember this. Down payment was around 2 lakhs. I took a loan of 8 lakhs. Home loan EMI was around 8,600. Sale date was 1/1/2006. Again, 5 years, I had this house. And I sold it for 11.11 lakhs. I still remember this because it was with great difficulty I sold, and finally the broker said, let's do it for 11 lakh 11,000. Probably it had something to do with numerology for the buyer, so, or for the broker. Now, why did I sell the house in Nalasopara and buy in Andheri? Now, why did I buy this house? What are the reasons for buying a house in Andheri? I lived all my life in Andheri. I lived in Andheri East, and I was very familiar with this suburb, Andheri. It was a great place. I was born here. Our first house was here. Second house was here, where I lived before marriage. And then I was looking for a house, obviously, again in that place. And so I went for that house. Now it is closer to South Mumbai, where I was working. Now I was working in Fort, in Kolaba. So those places were closer um, to Andheri as opposed to Nalasopara. Nalasopara was very far. So I was closer to South Mumbai, where I was working. I was getting married, so wanted to give the comfort to my wife. I didn't want to take her to Nalasopara and live in that far distant home. So I wanted to live in a place, in a familiar environment where I had a lot of my friends. In fact, I used to go to a church in Andheri, and many of my friends lived there. So I wanted a place which is closer. I had enough growth in my career. I had a better salary, higher affordability, and higher loan availability. So all these factors I considered. I still remember distinctly when I suddenly this thought came to my mind: why can't I buy a house closer to Andheri? In fact, I was thinking of Kandivali, Goregaon, Malad, which are slightly far away. Uh, they're away from Andheri. Uh, on my way to Nalasopar, but they were very close. But finally, I zeroed in on a house in Andheri. So it was a great, joyful moment for me, and thought it was a great move, and prices will move faster in suburbs. That was my belief, as opposed to outskirts. But they were all mistakes, and I tell you why. Mistake number two. Again, FOMO, fear of missing out. Again, I was mistaken. Even 5 years later, I was still mistaken. The sale of the house, um, since I sold a flat, I thought I must reinvest in another flat. That was my logic. I sold, I already had a house. I had a house. So now it's very natural for me to have another house. So I reinvested the money into that house. Again, staying on rent was never an option. I never thought that I could stay on rent. Again, I was mistaken. Now, why was a mistake? I was so young and all chances of relocating the city. And in fact, we just lived there for probably 2 years. And then we relocated to Hyderabad. So I was young. I had all chances of relocating. And this is also the same with many of you. In fact, during my time in early 2000, people were not relocating so much. But now many are relocating from Bangalore to Andheri, to Bangalore to Hyderabad, to Pune, to Gujarat, to Delhi, right, to Chennai. But during my days, it was not so. But still, I actually moved out. So there are all chances for all of you who are young, all chances of you moving out. So buying a house may not make sense. You may buy a house, spend a lot on furniture, woodwork, and finally give it on rent. Somebody else will live in that beautiful house. And then I relocated. We relocated in 2003 to to Hyderabad. So it was very difficult to monitor. I had a couple of tenants, two young men were living there, but it was always challenging to know what's happening. And they had actually, the house was not kept well and it had its own challenges. And then suddenly one day the tenants left and the house was vacant, no rent. I received no rent. So most part, I did not receive rent. That means from 2003, 3 January, when we relocated, till 2006 probably, I never got rent. So again, that was a mistake. Even the earlier house and even this house, I sold in a hurry because there was no caretaker. Nalasopara house was very far, and this was, I had relocated to another city, so it was anyway very far. So I could not monitor. I had limitations. So once in 2006, when I visited Mumbai, I thought, let me just sell this house. Why do I keep this without any purpose? And I sold it, and probably that was also another mistake. The CAGR on the house was 2.13%. The compounding annualized rate. So I calculated the IRR for the monthly EMI compared to the money I received in hand. Again, in this case, it was negative returns. I lost money. Then I did this IRR for the SIP of 4,600. Although my EMI was 8,600, I reduced the rent, assuming that I lived there 5 years. Again, I was very conservative. I should have only reduced the rent for 2 years because I lived there. The rest of the time, I did not live there. So all that EMI that I paid went into my house. I did not get benefit because I stayed elsewhere in Hyderabad. I did not stay in that house. So I calculated the IRR with SIP of 4,600 for 5 years in the BSC. What if I'd invested in the BSC index? And I got a return of 35%. I'm sure if I'd invested in a mutual fund for those 5 years, it would have been very different. It would have been much more. So, so this is exactly the reason why it was a mistake. So what was common about both properties? I mean, what were the common mistakes in both properties in my decision making? Number one, fear of missing out, the FOMO. Worried that everybody else is buying, and if I don't buy, I'll miss. And I will never be able to buy a property ever in my life. This is the fear I had. This is the fear many have, and I'm sure you also have this. It's a wrong fear. Misunderstanding that property is the best investment. So deep in our hearts, when we buy a house, and of course, when we buy the second and the third house, I know people who have bought many houses, they think that buying a property is the best investment option. But that's wrong. That's a misunderstanding. Property is not. And number three, I never considered living on rent. I always was thinking I should buy a house and live in that house. I was mistaken for many years of my life, at least from 1996 to 2006, 10 years of my life, out of which few years I was married. I was mistaken, right? All these mistakes. And finally, I did not factor my young age, my career progression that was happening, and the possibility of relocation. I was young. I didn't know. In fact, the reason I have made this video and I'm emphasizing and that is my mission for young families is because you don't commit the same mistakes which I committed and many have committed and many are still committing, and I don't want you to commit this mistake. So these were the common mistakes in both my properties in my decision making. Now let's talk about third property, the property number 3, which I purchased in a place called Kukatpalli. It's near High Tech City. It is the IT hub in Hyderabad. So this is property number 3. Now, for those of you who are not from Hyderabad, this is the map of where I live. This is the place where I live right now. In fact, this is the place. And here is JNTU University, which is a well-known place, a college, a university. And here is, this is an area, this is where it is the high-tech city, the IT hub. And here is also a place called the financial district. Here we have a lot of financial services companies and also big companies like Microsoft, Wipro, ICICI, Capgemini, and some of the big companies are here. So this is where I purchased my house. I will share with you why I bought a house here, right? In the next slide. So let me share you a few details of my property number 3. It's a flat in Kukatpalli, as I mentioned. The purchase date is 1/6/2006, which is 16 and 26. That is 18 years ago, I purchased this house. Purchase price was roughly with registration 30 lakhs. 6 lakhs was the down payment. I took a home loan for 24 lakhs and the EMI was roughly 23,000 for a 15-year loan. And the current value, I am living in this house. It is not an investment per se. I'm not going to liquidate this house. I'm going to stay in this house as long as I can, as long as I would like to. So it's not applicable. Now, why was this property number 3 not a mistake? It also could have been a mistake, but I also could have made a mistake in buying the third property. But there are some things which I did wisely, thanks to my wife, my family, based on our decisions. This is what we did. Now, why it was not a mistake? I relocated in Hyderabad in Q1 of 2003, but purchased a flat in 2006. And this is one big change that happened in my life for the first time. For the first time, I started living on rent. I had no concept of living on rent, but because I moved into Hyderabad, it was not Mumbai, my place where I grew up. Hyderabad was a sort of a temporary place for me. I never imagined I would live here for 20 years and 20, right now, nowadays, uh, 21 years. I never thought. I, I thought I would go. And that's the reason probably I did not buy a house. And I never thought of settling here. So I waited before buying a house. And I think this is the way one has to think. This should be our psychology, that I should not immediately go and buy a house where I start living. That should be the philosophy of life. Unless you feel you are settling, you should not go for a house. Remember, house is permanent. Spend a lot of time, emotions to buy a house. Now, by this time, I was into a stable job. I joined in 2003. I joined a small company, an IT company, which was actually in a contract with Franklin Templeton called the BOT, Build, Operate, and Transfer. So by 2006, I had moved into the roles of Franklin Templeton, and they had built a big facility in Hyderabad. I loved my job. I enjoyed. There was a good career progression, a good salary jump in 3 years. In fact, we were also given, a joining bonus in Franklin Templeton. My children were born. My first daughter was born in 2004, and in 2007, my second daughter was born. So we were preparing for our second child in 2006, and we wanted less volatility. Not planning to move, and I think this is the right time. This is the sweet spot, I would say, when you think of buying a house. Probably I could have waited a little more, slightly early, but still, this happened to be the right time. I purchased this house close to the new office. It's a huge campus that Franklin Templeton had built, it in the IT hub, uh, in the financial district. So we moved. We were living far away, around at least 20 kilometers, 25 kilometers. We moved from there to this facility, to this flat, so that we wanted to be closer to the office. So these are the reasons why it was not a mistake. If you see here, things were shaping up here. And probably I could have waited. I'll share a little later why I could have waited. But nevertheless, this turned out to be not a mistake. So we have seen the three properties, two mistakes. And now the important thing, what is that one lesson I learned? Early in life, build your corpus by investing in high return products. Let me repeat and I'll explain. Early in life, focus on building a corpus by investing in a high return product. In your 20s, 30s, you have a long runway. You can invest in high risk, high return products. And you must do that. I should have done that. I missed. So early in life, so this is the one lesson I learned, and I want you to know this. Always focus on a high return product. And what is that? What is the drawback of? So before we talk about how we can make high returns, let me talk to you about the drawback of buying real estate early in life. Number one, real estate has historically given 7 to 8 or 9% returns on investment, especially apartments. I know there are times when prices shoot up. Yes, there are people who would say, oh, I made a lot of money. Of course, it is questionable. A lot of money, if you look at returns, that is what matters. And As I shared with you, my earlier two apartments in Mumbai did not give me any returns. In fact, I got negative returns. Yes, later on, the Mumbai house that I had went up. Of course, it went up everywhere, including Hyderabad. Now, at a young age, taking a loan, paying interest, and buying a house deprives you from building a corpus, giving high returns, especially in equities, mutual funds. So, your money, your every month, your EMI, which goes into buying the house, building the asset. Remember that EMI includes interest, high interest. So you are blocking, most of your money is going into EMIs. So you're blocking, you're depriving from buying investments, investing into equities, which will give you much higher returns, even 12 to 15% returns. And as I already mentioned, both my properties gave me negative returns because I bought them using loans. If I had purchased them without loans, there would have been a little profit, 1 to 2%, 3%. But I took loans. Obviously, I'm paying a huge interest. It's a loss. Even though I got tax exemptions, but still it was a loss. Now, what I should have done? Now, on hindsight, thinking what I could have done, what mistakes I did. So, what I should have done. Now when I think about it, if I have to advise somebody like you, what I would do? Start an SIP or a regular investing in mutual funds or stock markets from 1996 to 2006. An SIP of 2,500 from 1996 when I purchased my first house till 2006 when I sold my second house. If I had invested in Franklin, this is a place I worked, so I just chose a fund, Franklin Prima Fund, which is a mid-cap company fund, mid-cap category fund. It would have given me 27 lakhs roughly. And I chose this because after that, the house that I purchased, I never sold. So from 2,500, when I started giving EMIs, right? So I calculated. Now, I could have purchased my own flat in Hyderabad with my own money because it cost me 30 lakhs. And I already had made 27.36 lakhs. Even if I had used 6 lakhs, probably, and taken a loan and stayed invested in that money, which is 27.36 minus 6 lakhs, today I would have been sitting on additional 3.15 crores because the rest of the money I have invested, whatever I had, I invested in this house where I'm living. Now, if I had done an SIP of 2,500, but with a step up of 500 every year, that means 2,500 in the first year, then 3,000 in the second year, then 3,500 in the third year, I could have done. My salary was growing. Every year I had to increase by 500 rupees. It would have given me 43 lakhs. And if I had done the same calculations, out of 43 lakhs, taken away 6 lakhs for the down payment and taken a loan and kept this money, today I would be sitting on 5.5 crores additional money. So buying those two properties cost me very, very dearly. So it will cost you very, very dearly if you are in your 30s and you want to buy a house. Don't do that. So, should I never buy a property? Is the question you may be having. Yes, you can. So, my recommendation would be buy one decent sized house for self consumption. What do I mean by decent sized? I mean a house which is not too big, because remember, the bigger the house, bigger part of your corpus is going into that house. right? So a lot of your corpus which you have saved goes into that house, and that gets locked because your house is not an investment. You're living in that house, right? So, and remember, and if you're taking a loan, so you're paying a high interest for a bigger house. So you are the outflow of money from your pocket is more. So go for a decent sized house uh, for self consumption later in life in your early or mid 40s, because by then you have a bigger corpus. So 10 years, 10, 12 years you have saved, invested, and your money has grown. And you just have to make a judgment. Do you have enough corpus for your children's education, which will be roughly 10 years later? And do you have enough for your retirement? Obviously, the first thing which comes to anybody's mind is the, the financial goals for your children. Remember, you're also parallelly building a corpus for your retirement. So I've covered that in my other videos. You can watch them. But you should have enough for your children's education. You should feel that you are having enough and you can build a good corpus if your financial goals targets are in the 50s, right? So when you're comfortable that you have big enough corpus, you go for a house. So build your corpus using equities. Equities are the engine for the growth of your wealth, because they give you 12 to 15% returns. So ensure that you build your corpus using equities in your 30s and 40s, ranging from 80% to 70%. Let it keep coming down as you grow in your age. So in your 30s, you should have roughly 80% of your portfolio in equities. So start your SIPs early. Take advantage of the compounding. Watch my video, 3 legs of compounding. That will help you to understand how important is compounding, how time, money, and the returns will help you take advantage of compounding. So, in your early 30s and 40s, do this, build your corpus, and then buy your house. And if you buy your house, then you will not make a mistake. Your one property will be zero mistakes, and there will be no lessons to learn, because all the lessons you can learn right now. I'm sure you're wondering that does that mean that I can never buy a real estate as an asset class or as an investment? Of course not. You can buy. In fact, you should buy later. Later, when you have enough equities in your portfolio, yes, you can have other asset classes which will give you good returns, which will beat inflation. Real estate, gold bonds, and other high yielding instruments. Of course, you can and you should. But remember that your portfolio should have a huge equities. Your portfolio should be filled with equities first, earlier part of your life, because that is the only time when you can grow your wealth. You have a long runway, you can take higher risks. As a simple rule of thumb, 100 minus your age. So if you are 30, 70 plus percentage should be into equities. And once you are 40, later in 40, once you have bought a house, and later on, if you feel that you have got enough money to buy another house, yes, why not? You can buy a house which will give you rental yields. I would recommend a commercial property where the rental yields are high. Otherwise, your rental yields will be 2 to 3% in a residential property. Plus, your house will grow at a rate of 6-7%. So you may touch 10 plus, but remember, equities will give you more than 12 to 15% on an average. First, focus on equities. In fact, asset allocation is a very important part of your portfolio. Asset allocation basically means means equities, a portion into equities, gold, real estate, bonds, and other asset classes. So definitely you must have a reasonable portfolio with reasonable asset allocation. I wish somebody had told me this 30 years ago. I would have saved a lot of money, invested, and it would have grown. But I thank God that better late than never. In the last 10, 12 years, I've been able to grow my wealth, being disciplined, investing in the right places, doing SIPs, and never stopping SIPs. Keep on increasing. Step up your SIPs. And if you do that, you will grow your wealth. After listening to my tale of 3 properties, 2 mistakes, 1 lesson learned, what is your view? What do you think? Do you think this is realistic, what I've talked about? Because everybody talks about having properties. What do you think? Is it really realistic that one should not buy property early in life? What do you think? Let me know in the comment box. Because we have grown up listening, watching our families, our relatives, our friends. First thing that they do is buy a house. And how come I am telling that you should not buy a house but invest in equities? It is not just me, but there are many financial experts, financial planners who will tell you this. I hope there is some learning for you. You can do your own learning, your own research, watch more videos, read up, and I'm sure you will get an idea. If this video has added value to you, please like this video. And if you haven't subscribed, I strongly recommend do subscribe and become a part of this channel. Thank you, and I'll see you in my next video.